Sunday morning broke soft over the small frontier town, the church bell swinging slow against a pale September sky. The sound carried across the dirt streets and hitching posts, calling the righteous and the weary alike. Dust rose where wagon wheels had rolled, hanging in the air like old secrets that refused to settle. Families walked in their Sunday best, dresses brushed and bonnets tied, boots polished though worn thin. The town square looked washed in expectation. Yet behind the crisp clothes, behind the measured steps, whispers already stirred like smoke twisting upward. Clara May Whitfield stood at the edge of it all, her infant son bundled in a faded quilt that smelled faintly of wood smoke. She clutched him close, her hands trembling despite her effort to appear steady. The child slept against her shoulder, soft breath warming the hollow of her neck. Clara's dress was plain, a once white muslin long dulled to cream, mended at the hem by her own hand. She took a breath deep enough to hurt and started forward, her boots pressing patterns into the dust. The church loomed ahead, whitewashed boards gleaming in the morning light, steeple catching the sun like a pointing finger to heaven. Inside, the pews creaked with the weight of neighbors already settled. Faces turned as Clara entered, her child pressed to her chest. The air changed. Conversation stilled, and in its place came a hush thick enough to hear the scrape of shoes across wood. A woman in a bonnet leaned to whisper, not soft enough, her voice sharp as a quill. "That's the girl who bore a child without a ring." Beside her, another clucked her tongue in pious dismay. Clara felt the burn creep up her neck into her cheeks, heat that no fire could rival. She kept walking, seeking a pew, praying for space. Eunice Carter, with her stiff posture and righteous chin, shifted deliberately, sliding her family closer together until no room remained. A message without words. The pastor, a thin man with spectacles fogged from the cold air outside, adjusted them nervously. His eyes flickered to Clara, then to the crowd waiting on his judgment. His voice came mild, almost apologetic, yet final. "Miss Whitfield, perhaps today is not the day. Perhaps you should come back when matters are settled." The words cut deeper than any outright condemnation. Clara hugged her son tighter, standing frozen in the center aisle. A hand, not the pastor's but another woman's, pressed against her shoulder, firm and unyielding. In a single push, Clara stumbled backward, nearly losing her footing. Her boot heel caught the edge of the step, and she staggered into the doorway. Gasps rippled, but no one moved to catch her. The bell outside tolled again, ringing through the silence like judgment itself. The sound followed her down the steps, out into the open square where the sunlight was too bright, too exposing. Clara's arms tightened around her child as if he were the only anchor in a storm. Her breath came in shallow bursts, each step dragging shame heavier than her body could bear. The quilt slipped, and she stopped to adjust it with trembling fingers. "I'm sorry," she whispered into her baby's hair. "I'm sorry, love." Mama tried. Curtains twitched in nearby houses, faces pressed against the glass. Whispers carried across the street, curling into her like barbed wire. She kept walking, though the ground felt soft, unsteady, as though the earth itself wanted to swallow her. At the hitching post leaned a man, boots planted firm in the dirt, hat shadowing his eyes. Wyatt Holloway had been there all along, quiet as the horizon, a figure no one marked until now. His gaze was steady, not prying, just seeing as one sees the sun rise. When Clara's knees threatened to buckle, he pushed from the post and stepped forward. Dust stirred around his boots, the sound of spurs soft, almost a song. He stopped before her. For a moment the world hushed. The wagons creaked, the wind stilled, even her child ceased fussing. Wyatt removed his hat, held it against his chest, and extended his hand. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The gesture alone carried the weight of dignity, of respect denied her moments before. Clara blinked, unsure, her lashes wet with tears she had fought to hide. The crowd watched from doorways and windows, hungry for spectacle. For an instant she thought of turning, of running, but her baby stirred against her shoulder and her hand rose on its own, as though guided. Her fingers slipped into his. Warmth spread through her palm, steadiness flowing from his skin into her bones. Together they turned back. Whispers swelled, louder now, slicing the air like knives. Wyatt didn't falter. His hand held hers firm. His shoulders squared with a quiet defiance that spoke louder than any man's sermon. The church doors loomed again, the paint chipped, the hinges groaning when he pushed them open. Inside, pews rustled, necks craned, eyes sharpened. Eunice's glare cut like a blade, her lips pressed thin. Wyatt's gaze swept the room, not hard but unyielding, a look that dared anyone to rise. None did. The hush deepened, the organist's fingers hesitating on the keys before music trembled back to life. Clara moved forward, every step echoing like a drumbeat of courage. She slid into a pew, baby nestled in her arms, Wyatt lowering himself beside her. The hymn rose, yet for Clara it was not the music she heard. It was the sound of her own heart, steadier than before. It was the silence where shame once screamed, and in that stillness she felt something take root, not in the church or in the town, but inside her. A hand had reached when the world turned away. That was enough to keep walking. The service ended with the organ's last trembling note, yet Clara heard nothing but the whispering that slithered through the air. When she stepped outside, the sun was sharp on her face, the dust bright as fire underfoot. Wyatt still walked beside her, steady as a shadow that chose to stay. Around them, townsfolk gathered in clusters like blackbirds on a fence line. Whispers, louder now, spoken bold as though her sin were their Sunday sport. Eunice Carter's bonnet bobbed through the crowd until she stood square before Clara. Her lips pressed thin, eyes glinting hard as flint. "You'd best know, girl," she hissed, "a woman who bears a child without vows brings nothing but ruin." The venom in her voice cut through the air like a whip. Clara's chest tightened, shame threatening to drag her back into silence. But Wyatt shifted. He didn't raise his voice, didn't flare with anger. He simply looked at Eunice, and his voice, calm as a low river, carried farther than thunder. "Decency don't come from pews, ma'am. It comes from how we treat folk when it costs us something." His words left the crowd stunned, no retort quick enough. Clara said nothing, but standing there, she felt taller, as though his steadiness had lent her spine its strength. They walked on. Out of town, where the cabins leaned against the prairie like old friends, Wyatt led her toward her own small place. A sagging roof, a stoop worn soft by weather, but home nonetheless. He didn't enter, didn't ask. He only set his hat against his chest again and adjusted the baby's quilt, careful with his calloused hands. Clara's throat tightened at the simple grace of it. Not pity, not charity, just care. That night, as the sky bled into violet and stars shone through ragged clouds, the town still hummed with talk. Men hunched in the saloon, mugs in hand, voices low but sharp. Some spoke of sending her off, saying sin had no place in God's house, no place in their town. Wyatt stood among them a while, listening. He drank nothing. When their talk turned cruel, he set his glass down untouched and left, the bat-wing doors sighing shut behind him. Clara knelt by her baby's cradle, the lamplight painting shadows across her tired face. Her voice was soft, a prayer barely spoken. "Lord, don't let me beg for their kindness. Just give me the strength to raise him right." She rocked the cradle gently until the child's breathing deepened, steady as sleep itself. Sunday came again. Clara dressed in the same plain muslin, worn but clean, her hair pulled back with trembling fingers. The town seemed colder that morning, the church bell heavier, each toll a warning. Still she walked. Each step was a battle won. At the church steps the crowd was waiting, faces harder than before. Eunice stood tall, arms crossed. Two men shifted forward, broad-shouldered, their boots thudding against the wood. "Not today, miss," one said, planting himself before the door. "We won't have scandal under this roof again." Clara's knees weakened, but she pressed her child close. Her lips parted, but words failed. Behind the gathered wall of townsfolk, the whispers sharpened, eager for her retreat. Then the sound of hooves cut across the square. Wyatt rode in, his horse's stride slow and deliberate, the kind of pace that made men step aside without thinking. Dust curled up from each hoofbeat, glowing in the morning light. He dismounted, boots hitting dirt with finality, and walked forward until he stood at Clara's side. His eyes swept the crowd. His voice was not loud, yet it carried with unshakable weight. "You call yourselves God-fearing, yet you'd shove a mother and her child from his house? If that's the faith you hold, then it ain't her that strayed. It's you." The silence that followed was a silence that burned. No one moved, no one spoke. The men who barred the door shifted uneasily, suddenly smaller in their defiance. Eunice's mouth opened, but no sound came. Wyatt extended his hand again, the same way he had a week before. Without hesitation this time, Clara slipped her hand into his. The strength in his grip steadied her trembling. Together they walked forward. The men parted not by choice but by something deeper, by the unshakable truth that clung to Wyatt's words. The doors creaked open. Inside, the air was thick with tension. Eyes darted, pews shifted, but no one dared stop them. Clara moved to the same pew as before. She sat, her child cooing softly, Wyatt beside her. The organ hesitated, then music bloomed, timid at first, then steady. And in that hush between notes something changed. Clara's shame, once a chain around her neck, slipped free. She felt it in the way her shoulders loosened, the way her breath came deeper. Not because the town had forgiven her. They hadn't. Not because the gossip had died, it hadn't. But because she had walked back in, and this time she was not alone. Sunlight streamed through stained glass, falling across her child's face like a promise. Wyatt's presence beside her was not salvation, not a vow, but a quiet shield. It was enough. For the first time since her world had broken, she felt seen. The whispers would linger like shadows in corners, but they no longer owned her. Dignity was not theirs to grant or deny. It was hers to claim. And she had claimed it by walking through those doors, hand in hand with a man who believed mercy was strength. And so, dear listener, let me tell you this: it takes but one hand, steady and unafraid, to walk another soul back into the light. In a world quick to cast stones, be the one who lifts. For in the end, kindness is the only sermon worth remembering, and mercy is the only hymn worth singing.